Wikipedia in Bhutanese and is therefore going to be a very powerful person in defining what the truth is. Now, I don't distrust Wikipedia's motive, but as a journalist, I find the idea of an arbiter of truth that is opaque very disturbing as a concept.
I would challenge that it's opaque. You can pull up the history of everyone who's contributed and participated. You may not know who all of those people are in their backgrounds. You can see the history of their activity on other parts of Wikipedia. I don't think it's perfectly opaque, but it is, on some of these articles, there are hundreds of contributors.
I know. I mean, I had my students, do it and then write an article for me, a paper for me about the experience of doing it. All I'm saying is, believe me, I'm a fan of Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia. All I'm saying is that Wikipedia is emerging as something that we need to recognize as a vastly powerful arbiter of what is truth. That's power.
A powerful media institution.
Yes.
Does it need an ombudsman?
Well, I think it probably needs, I don't know exactly what it needs, honestly, Nicco. I mean, I think my point is that anything that is the arbiter of truth, like the New York Times, needs to be accountable in ways that, and I think that transparency is really important, especially in a world in which Google is now, and others, are tailoring their responses to our queries to a basically opaque profile that they keep, in which they give each individual who makes an inquiry a set of responses tailored to what Google thinks you want, rather than some kind of neutral thing. We were at a conference in New York a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking, Eli Parker was talking about how if any people in this room, if we all got out our BlackBerries and went to Google and Googled BP, we would get different responses. All of us would get different responses. Some of us would get millions of responses that others didn't get. I mean, although who has time to sort of scroll through? The hierarchy, though, the immediate response would be one that would be tailored to algorithms that Google does not disclose and does not tell you that it is using to tailor a response to you. That is something also that gives me concern.
I mean, I definitely am concerned about the way we culturally, abdicate responsibility to machines, to Google, right? But I also think that holding the emerging institutions and platforms of the digital age accountable is important. I would argue in some ways, certainly Wikipedia, I think, is less opaque and in many ways more accountable than the way some stories get written in traditional media institutions all the time.
I wouldn't debate that or argue with it. I think that Jimmy Wales right now, I think Wikipedia as it exists is those things. All I do know, though, is that Wikipedia in Bhutan is not Wikipedia in the United States. And it is an arbiter of truth and a brand that is like Google. It's becoming the sort of the authoritative truth teller. And I think when you have a concentration of power, and this is a concentration of power, it bears looking at. And I think, frankly, that it ought to be on the front page of the New York Times about what Google is doing, how Wikipedia is faring, and I think that it's important for people like the people in this room simply to be aware of it and to follow it.
I agree. Like when you Google something, you're not getting the same results as the person sitting next to you. Don't assume that that's a shared experience.
So I think we're ready for questions, don't you think? But I have two things to say. One is, if you don't know this already, they're very happy in Bhutan. I just want you to know
I'm very glad to hear that.
They have the happy index, the happiest country in the world, just in case you want to go there. The second thing is I want to do a little informal survey. So hear me out. How many of you get your news from either traditional newspapers, TV, radio, and online news organizations, WashingtonPost.com, NewYorkTimes.com, whatever it is? And I'll ask that in a second. And how many get it from other sources which are not in any way linked to traditional news? So let me ask, just so you guys know what your audience... okay, so... Yeah, let's try that. I think I'm more interested in your first instinct. When you wake up in the morning, what do you define as your source of news? Let's start with that. So, how many of you get your news in some way or another from traditional means? Raise your hand. How many of you get your news from other sources that are online but not traditional media in any way, primarily? Okay. There you go. Let me, so you know what you're talking to now. Let's start with questions. What I'd like you to do is identify, give your name and identify yourself, and we'll go from there. Go ahead.
Dave Raven, freelance.
Speak up. We have a mic, too.
Dave Raven, freelance journalism. I want to go back to your core point, Alex, which is who's going to... Wikipedia is not going to do the Duke Cunningham story. Wikipedia is not going to do the Crystal story, unless I'm missing something.
No, you're exactly right.
Who's going to fill the gap? I think that's the big question of the day. Who's going to fill the gap of that kind of institutional, hardcore, investigative digging?
Well, this is the way I see things at the moment. I think that the thing that digital technology has done economically to the mainstream media, and newspapers do most of this work, this core, iron core of reporting on the local or state or national, international level. The digital technology has taken away their golden pool of money in the form of classified advertising. That's what they depended on for many years. That's what they had effectively a monopoly on, and that's virtually, I mean, buying a car, buying a house, getting a job, it's, digital technology's made for that. And that has cost them dearly. And then the economic downturn came, and they got terribly hammered by that. And so the result has been a retooling of the newspaper industry. Well, the newspaper industry right now is actually making a profit. I mean, it is making a modest operating profit. In some cases, it's always based on a lower set of revenues than they had before. But most newspapers in this country right now are operating at a profit. Now, where we're going to go from here, of course, we don't really know. But my belief is this. The only way, long-term, that newspapers and news organizations that prize news are going to be able to stay in business is if they persuade people they're giving them something that's genuinely of value. They're going to have to raise their game. They're going to have to do the work. They're going to have to do the kind of reporting that is powerful and has an impact and that really makes their communities feel that they're being served. That is the critical moment we're in right now. Will the newspaper industry, with this respite from economic calamity, reinvest in journalism, reinvest in giving people what they really need and what they need? And I think that the audience and the people who support newspapers and provide the readership that advertisers want are people that do it not as a philanthropy. They do it because they recognize the importance of the institution to their community and the importance of the information. But if they don't feel like they're getting it, if they feel like they're just supporting something that is, not going to give them what they need, they're eventually going to leave, and that'll be the end of them. So I think that newspapers and mainstream news broadly has the chance, but they're going to have to do it by proving to people that they're giving them something of real value, something of real importance, and that's not the way they have operated. They've been complacent, they have been lazy, they've been rich, fat, and happy. Well, those days are over. It's a